Hey, Governor Newsom.
It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
You've been getting a lot of praise for shutting things down quickly in your state and doing your best to get ahead of the spread. So what is your biggest concern right now when it comes to fighting this virus?
Well, that we run the 90-yard dash, that people get complacent, that people get cabin fever, that people, the metaphor in this case would be people cut their parachute when we're way above the ground. We've got to stick with this. We've got to continue to practice appropriate physical distancing. The stay-at-home orders are so profoundly important to meet this moment. There's nothing more substantive we can do to bend the curve. And so that's the enemy. The moment is complacency. And so we're just doubling down on what has gotten us here to this point, which is time. We have now bent the curve enough where we're able to organize ourselves in a deliberative way, anticipating always the worst because we're preparing.
Now, Governor, this is Sunny Hostin. Last month, you wrote a letter to President Trump projecting that over 25 million Californians would contract the virus in the next 8 weeks. That's more than half of California. Are you expecting to see that sort of widespread outbreak like we're dealing with here in New York? Because you haven't really seen that type of outbreak yet.
No, not as long as we practice physical distancing, social distancing. That assumed we did nothing. That assumed we sat back and just were victims of fate in the future, and we just were bystanders as opposed to taking responsibility and ownership to do something more and do better. Look, I have the privilege of representing the largest state in our union, the fifth largest economy in the world, 40 million Californians strong, and it's just been an extraordinary thing to see people across every conceivable difference up and down this state that have really stepped up to meet this moment. And if we continue to do that, those numbers will be in our rear view. But if, again, we let down our guard, if we assume, well, we've got this, or we're just doing better than this state or that state, that somehow magically this is going to disappear on its own, we'll be making an historically bad mistake. So we've got to double down, continue to do what we've done, and again, prepare for numbers that are going to significantly increase over the course of the next few weeks, undoubtedly.
So, you've already made the decision to keep California schools closed for the rest of the school year. And Congressman Devin Nunez called that overkill, quote unquote. And he insisted that kids could have gone back to school in 2 weeks or 4 weeks. How do you respond to that, Governor?
Well, I don't want to give him much air. I have not sourced him for advice on pretty much any issue, and I say that as respectfully as I can, but particularly on public health issues. He's made some statements in the past that were not consistent with the advice and counsel that I've gotten from the experts. And so we'll continue to listen to the experts, try to avoid some elected officials that, frankly, may not have the benefit of some of the insight that many of us do here. And when I say here, quite literally where I'm sitting today, it's the Emergency Operations Center at the state of California, 1,000+ people strong, federal government, private sector, local and state government, all coming together, cross-pollinating with ideas and perspectives, constantly iterating, getting new information from around the world, looking at trend lines that are becoming headlines, and anticipating things. And so not everybody has that benefit, and so I'll forgive him that advice, but the schools should be closed. The schools will be closed through the summer, and classroom work will be done through distance learning, and will be done with the extraordinary heroism of mothers and working parents and caregivers that have to substitute for those teachers, and teachers that also have to substitute their own time and attention away from their classrooms, even virtually, to take care of their own kids. Those are the real heroes at this moment.
Hi, Governor. The mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, is now urging everyone in his city to wear homemade face masks. Do you plan on making that a statewide recommendation?
Well, 2 days ago, we actually put out guidelines related to face coverings, and I want to make a distinction between masks and coverings. We are in desperate need to find more N95 masks as a priority for our healthcare professionals, and we don't want to run on those masks. What we do, though, want is to encourage people to continue, most importantly, their physical distancing, continue to hold the line in terms of just personal hygiene, washing your hands. Those are the most important things you can do. But our guidelines say not as a substitute, but additive to that. If you're going to a grocery store and you're queued up in a line where you can't practice physical distancing, then we believe those face coverings can be beneficial. So we put out those guidelines, and I applaud Mayor Garcetti for his leadership in this space. A number of other local leaders are doing the same, taking it even a step further.
Now, Governor, states have had to compete with one another for essential medical supplies. Governor Cuomo compared his efforts to get ventilators to bidding on eBay with 49 other states. You called it the Wild, Wild West. What do you mean by that?
Well, it is. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all trying to source from similar places from all around the globe to get more ventilators. Because at the end of the day, we talk about chloroquine and we talk about remdesivir. We talk about these treatments. There's no greater treatment than a ventilator. I'm not a fatalist as it relates to someone going on a ventilator. Ventilators can save lives. We weren't able to get many ventilators from the federal government, the national stockpile, only 170. And unfortunately, most did not come working. But rather than complaining about that, we brought them up to Silicon Valley, Bloom Energy, and they fixed all of those 170, sent them back down to Southern California. We have found an additional 4,252 ventilators, including from people like Elon Musk, and we're working with Virgin Orbit that usually does launch systems and rocket engines, and they're starting to repurpose their lines. We're trying to be as creative and resourceful as we can. We can finger point, we can lament, or we can start to address this moment head on and take some account. Let me just say this, though, to your question. We're trying to work with other governors in a more collaborative spirit. I've reached out to Governor Inslee in Washington State, Governor Pritzker in Illinois, among many other governors, to talk about how we can organize our procurement, not just of ventilators and N95 masks, but gowns and shields and coveralls and gloves, so that we're not competing against each other. And I say that knowing that California, outside the federal government itself, is one of the largest procurers of protective gear in the world because of our purchasing power. And I don't want to do that in a way that hurts those other states.